Hi, this is Mrs. Guthrie, and this is Code.org Computer Science Discovery Unit 3, Lesson 22, Collisions. And in this particular lesson, we're going to learn about different types of collisions where two sprites touch each other. And I am recording from my classroom because I wanted you to see behind me where I've had to take some notes on the board. And those are just as much for me as my students because there's a lot of interactions happening in this lesson. And it's important to be able to try to keep them straight and what each kind sort of does. So as I've gone through it, I've taken notes, and I encourage you to do the same thing. So we look at in bubble 1, actually what we see happening is a giraffe and a monkey colliding with each other. And the giraffe pushes the monkey off the screen. And when we go to bubble 2, that asks you to think about how you would do it and using what you already know, what we learned in previous lessons, to program the giraffe to push the monkey off the screen. So right now it's not going to do that. You're going to see the giraffe is going to keep moving at a velocity of 1, and the monkey's not moving. So if we want the giraffe to do that, we need an if statement, a conditional. And we want if the giraffe is touching the monkey, then we want the monkey to also have a velocity for it to also move. The monkey is going to move at the same velocity as a giraffe, which is 1, as we see in line 4. And let's see if that indeed works. As you can see, the giraffe is pushing the monkey off the screen. So yay, that works. We're going to learn a block that will do that for us, so we don't have to use those conditionals every time. So let's keep going. In level 3, in lesson 22, we want the elephant to push the hippo off the screen. And it says, notice that the elephant moves at a random y velocity each time the program runs. So sometimes the elephant goes at a velocity of -3, -2, -1, somewhere between there. And we want the hippo to move off at the same velocity. So again, we're going to need an if statement. If the elephant is touching the hippo, well, what speed, what velocity do we want the hippo, which is currently not moving, what velocity do we want it to have? We want it to have the same velocity as the elephant. So we want the hippo velocity y to be equal to the elephant's velocity y, whatever that is, because we don't know if it's -3 or -2 or -1. But there you go. Now they're moving at the same speed, even though the elephant right now is moving really slow. The hippo's moving at the same. Very good. Let's continue. And there's other ways to go about playing around with that as well. In this one, that kind of interaction, that if statement where it's going to push something like that, is going to be replaced by something called the displace code. Displace is just like the one when this, and this is the notes I read behind me. This was what we kind of came up with together in class. When the sprite and the target touch, both of them stay touching, but they continue to move in the direction of the sprite, the one that is stated first in that displace code. So we want the elephant to displace the elephant to push the hippo, not the hippo to displace the elephant. So you can see that the target, which is the second sprite that we have listed, is going to get pushed in whatever the same direction of the sprite. So both of these are sprites, elephant and the hippo, but in the code, the first one, we call sprite, and the second one we call target. When I say the sprite and the target, that's what I'm talking about there. All right, we fixed that error by switching the order of them in the displace block. Bubble 5 is interesting. This is where you really start exploring with all four interactions: collide, bounce, bounce off, and you can play with displace as well. And just see what they all do. So we start off with the collide. And the collide looks a lot like displace, doesn't it? In this case, the parrot is colliding with the penguin, and the parrot is over here. When the parrot collides with the penguin sort of pushes it out of the way. It cannot compete with the penguin. And in this case, the target actually is going to be continuing in whatever direction it's moving. This block, collide block, if the target is not moving, if the penguin was sitting still, then if the parrot hit it, the parrot would not be able to move the penguin. In fact, it would block it. So a lot of times in video games, if there's walls or things like that, we use the collide block to block things, to keep things from moving past. All right, the bounce one, I can hear them cleaning the floors out in the hallway. When we do the bounce, both sprite and target move away from each other and seem to go in the opposite direction but maintain the same actual rate of speed, just in the opposite velocity direction. So, as you can see, both of them do that. If we use the bounce off, now you can see the parrot is going to bounce off the penguin, and I would describe this, the magnitude of that velocity, how fast it's moving, seems to speed up. And it moves again in the opposite direction, and the target, which in this case is the penguin, never really changes. It just keeps moving at that same velocity. It doesn't seem to be impacted. So those are important things to just kind of play around and make sure you understand some of the differences between the bounce off, the collide, and the displace. And I will tell you, for me personally, I spent a good amount of time on that. That was where I took my notes and made my observations on what I did back behind me. So, displace, collide, bounce, and bounce off. We have a basketball that we want to bounce off the floor. So, we are going to try out some different things. Do we want it to bounce? Do we want it to bounce off? This was where I learned playing here around on this one that the collide blocks things. So if we want it to be like a character that hits that wood wall and can't make it through it, that would be the collide. And then displace is where things would start moving off the screen. So I did this earlier, but I'm going to play around with it. So the basketball, bounce, and the wood. Let's see. Uh-oh. In this case, we know this is not right because the floor just fell out from under it. So that is the incorrect answer. Let's try bounce off. Oh, in the first one, the wood moved. In bounce off the wood is not moving. It stays where it's at, and the ball just continues to bounce. And rotate, because it has a rotation set up here, rotation speed. So bounce off, when the sprite and the target touch, the target continues moving at the same velocity and direction. In this case, by the way, our target is not moving. So in bounce off, if it's not moving, it's going to continue not moving. And the sprite bounces in the opposite direction, kind of at a higher speed, or anyway, it goes, in this case, it's got a velocity with the counter pattern, but it goes in the opposite direction. So anyway, this is what you want. You want the bounce off. All right, let's finish and go to the next one. And I encourage you to play around with those. Again, continue to make notes because the collisions, the impacts of them are different based on if the target is moving or if it's not moving. It's going to change the way they interact. All right, and in this one we have an arrow. We want it to stop when it reaches the apple. So I talked about that a minute ago. That is called the collide. So we want the arrow when it collides with the apple, it should stop moving. And there you go. It indeed did. That is the collide block. It's not bouncing off. It's just stopping. It's being blocked. I thought this one was kind of neat. This one you have a gray cart and a blue cart. The gray cart moves first. The blue cart moves second. And you want them to basically switch velocities. So the one that was not moving starts moving, and the one that is moving stops. So I believe when I was playing around with this earlier, let's see if I got it right. See if the gray cart bounces the blue cart. Let's see. Boom. That's the one you're looking for. So if you're stuck on that one, gray cart bounces the blue cart. Now, if they collided, we used the collide and kept the sprite and the target in the same order. When the gray cart hit the blue cart, it would stop. And they'd both sit there and stop. If we displace them or use the bounce off, then they would, I encourage you, play around. They're going to interact differently. In some cases, it's going to push it out of the way. In other cases, it's going to do other things. So play around with those. Make notes. Now, when I was practicing earlier, I forgot to do this one. We have a little girl and she's pushing a suitcase at the subway. And in this case, it's kind of like back in the beginning when we had like the giraffe pushing the monkey. There's a couple different things you can do here. I believe that we can use the displace one. I think we could also use another one as well, maybe the bounce. But I know the displace one should work. So let's see, is it the kid displacing the suitcase? Order does matter. So let's see, yes. There we go. The kid is the one who is displacing the suitcase, pushing it out of the way. All right, in your assessment level, it's kind of fun. There is a lot to do. You need to use different interactions. I would like for you to use all 4 interactions. For each pair of animals, choose a sprite interaction that matches the target image on the right. I will tell you there is more than one right way to do this. There's more than one right. Like you can use collide sometimes and displace. One goes in the direction of the sprite, one goes in the direction of the target. And sometimes you can interact with those, use them interchangeably by just switching the sprite and the target. However, I want you to make the picture ultimately behave like the example. And I also want you to use all 4 bounce, bounce off, collide, and displace in the assessment level. If time allows, I really want you to look at on the challenges, especially the bounciness. I think that one is a very important. You can see that it's really easy, but sometimes things we don't want them to bounce off as much as others, and you can control that with the bounciness command. All right, that's all of lesson 22. I hope you did well, and have a lovely day or night, depending on when you're watching this. Bye.